I'm Raelin Saindon, your host of Live Out Loud. And I want to welcome you today to an important discussion that I received this morning through Spirit. I love looking for patterns. I enjoy puzzles. I've always loved a good mystery, something for me to figure out. I came into this world with a burning desire to understand, and in the understanding, to also be understood. And I think that that's at the heart of most of us as human beings in our human experience, is this desire to kind of unravel what we have gone through, the experiences that we've been involved in, the things that we've witnessed, the events that have impacted us, and gain some insight and some understanding along the way. So for some of you who know me personally, I have had traumas in my life, as we all have, each human being have. Some of us have the little t traumas, some of us have some big T traumas. When I was younger, I never knew my biological father, and I was assaulted repeatedly for a period of years by my stepfather, my sister's dad, that's what we'll say. And along the way as well, I was being raised by a mother who at that time, she herself had traumas growing up. She herself had witnessed certain abuses and had gone through some things herself. And it seemed to be, as I got older, as I understood more and began to unravel more and put more of the pieces together, seems to be a running theme through our family, through the generations. And these events shape us, right? They are part of our conditioning. They are woven into the fabric of our experience. And very often, they tend to disrupt perhaps our normal daily routines, disrupt our thinking, disrupt our behaviors, our actions, and our beliefs about ourselves, other people, and the world around us. And through these events, certainly I was impacted, never to the point of wanting it to overwhelm me so much that I refuse to strive to live a life in service to others and to live a life that searched for what was healthy, searched for what was healing. And in all of these discoveries, and this morning I was given this amazing message by Spirit, I've come to realize that many of us, and I'll go right into the metaphor that Spirit gave me, many of us have been approaching our lives and or have been taught to approach our lives, to approach the events that we experience like a puzzle. So for those of you who can see this, I video record my podcast as well. You can catch it on my YouTube channel. But for those of you who can see this, I have a puzzle in my hands, and it's a puzzle of the moon. And I just received it. I've been waiting for it. I'm so excited. Like I said, I love puzzles. And this puzzle has, oddly enough, 568 pieces. Very specific number. But if I didn't have the picture diagram, right, the picture on the box, to go with the picture that's been printed and imprinted on the front, on the top of these puzzle pieces, I'd kind of be in the dark. But I would still be able to navigate because I would have at least the imprint of the picture on the top of the pieces. But for many of us, most of us, I dare say, in periods of our life, and for some of us, we live in this state the entirety of our life, but we've been given pieces to the puzzle, but they've been flipped over and we only see the cardboard side. And for many of us, we were never taught, we were never informed that there was another viewpoint to look at, that there was even a picture, a diagram, right? A representation of what the puzzle should be and what the puzzle will become when the pieces all interlock. But we were simply handed these cardboard pieces and told to fit them together. And so for many of us, we strive to push these pieces in, fit them however we can. Some of us are patient and we wait until we find the piece that fits exactly. Some of us force a piece in. Some of us even cheat and cut and shave a piece so it fits. And some of us simply walk away from the process, throw our hands up in the air and say, I can't do it, it's overwhelming, there's too many pieces, and I can't see how any of this is important. I can't see a picture, a representation of the why or the how or the where or the when, and so I'm just giving up. And man, this metaphor for me really struck me to the point that I hurried with my morning routine and getting ready so that I could jump on and do this podcast spontaneously, completely spirit-led. So this discussion, the context of this discussion this morning came through from a conversation with a friend of mine, Sherry Elise, and you guys will meet her. She'll be coming on the show. But we were having a conversation, we were discussing in a group that has been her brainchild, that Spirit put upon her heart, discussing the book by Robin DiAngelo called White Fragility. And it's in the context of especially the current events that we're facing right now with the vivid in-your-face imagery of police brutality against Black individuals. And we've heard of the cases of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Philando Castillo, Sandra Bland, and many, many others, Atiana Jefferson, many, many others. And we've seen the hashtags and the taglines of, you know, Black people can't live their life daily. Black people can't barbecue because, quote unquote, Karen will call the cops on them, right? We've seen the news of Amy Cooper, a white woman using her whiteness, her skin, as a weapon against a man who was simply walking through Central Park and reminded her that her dog needed to be on a leash in this area. And because his skin was Black. So in this discussion we were having in our group, the question point, the discussion point was, at what point did it become so acutely uncomfortable for you in watching all of these events happening that suddenly sparked something inside of you, this desire to be more informed, this desire to notice and understand that you haven't even been given the entirety of the information, right? And so her response was very eloquent as always. And I was dialoguing with her, and in that dialogue, Spirit gave me this metaphor and told me that we had been given the history of America is a white history. The history that we've been told is a white history. The history of the world is a multicultural, multifaceted, multicolored history of one race, and that's the human race. But in this country, in our culture, from our white perspective and viewpoint, we've each been handed an incomplete puzzle, and we've been told that the way it was given to us with the cardboard facing was all there was for us. And so we've had some of those pieces put together for us, but again, it's been incomplete, and it's not a representation of the whole picture. I have a saying, it goes, context informs content. Context informs content. And what that means is we have to take events, people's lives, our own lives, current events in the world, global events, etc., history, human history, in the framework of a larger context. Because the pieces of the larger context, the groupings and subgroups of that larger context, informs the content that comes inside of us and that is expressed outside of us. And so the question then becomes for all of us, especially in this current environment, is what has been the context, that the framework that has been built for you that is informing the content that you're thinking, you're believing, and you're acting upon and expressing outwardly. And in this topic, the topic of racism, the topic of prejudices, the topic of we as white individuals want to say we don't see color. We have been taught and conditioned not to see color, but that is a false narrative. Again, it's a cardboard piece because color exists. My color is seen. In fact, those of you that are white as well, and if you see the imagery of me, you see my color, and there are a whole list of assumptions and beliefs. They're called shortcuts. In psychology, it's called heuristics, but it's a shortcut that of snap judgment that you make based upon what you see in my skin tone. And it's what you believe about me. And we do it on the regular to every human being that we meet. It's wired into us. It's ingrained in us. But when we're given the entirety of context, that changes the game. Then we understand and we're informed of the content that goes on inside of us and around us and our patterned behavior. And coming into this world, I told you, when I was a child, I was very curious. My biggest question, the first question that came out of my mouth was, why? 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 How come? Why? But why? But why not? But how come? Because I came into this world with a burning desire I was created this way, a burning desire to understand context, because my world was so fraught with disruptive content. My world was a world of neglect, of emotional abuse, mental manipulation, physical abuse at times, sexual, certainly. And the adults in my world, with the exception of my grandparents, but the adults in my world were all over the board in their content, because what I could see was the content, right? That's what we all see from everyone around us, is the content. I was raised in a family that valued going to church, and the Bible, I've read it extensively. The Bible talks about in the Old Testament that out from the heart, the mouth speaks. And it is the spring of the heart with which a person expresses. And their words either betray them, or their words will edify, right? Will lift up, will raise up, will encourage, will bring hope, will bring kindness, will bring healing. And it hasn't been until the last, I would say, probably 10 to 15 years that life has really pushed me into digging into these concepts and digging into these realities, and has begun to turn over some of those puzzle pieces that I was handed. Has disrupted the puzzle, removed the pieces from each other, and begun to show me by flipping them over, and then I can see some of the picture. I've also explained to people that I talk with, and in workshops I've given and classes I've taught, clients I've worked with, that oftentimes, that our life is a tapestry, and strings of varying threads and varying widths and colors and textures are woven in constantly into our tapestry. And oftentimes we look at the tapestry from underneath. So for some of you, if you sew, or if you cross stitch, or you crochet or knit, or you've watched people doing those activities, you can see during the process of creating a garment or a blanket or a cross-stitched patterned pillow or whatever have you, embroidery, you flip that over and you see the underside, and you see all the knots, and you see all the stitches, but the stitches don't make sense. On the back of it, the stitches are going every which direction, all over the place, right? And you don't get a sense of what the pattern is, what the picture is on top, what the final result is going to look like. You're just seeing the content. In that moment, when you look at the piece from the backside, from the underneath, and very often for us in our woven tapestry or in our puzzles, we are looking at the content. We are looking at the confusing portions, the portions that aren't making sense. But if we broaden our perspective, if we flip it over, if we turn over the pieces of the puzzle, if we look at life a new way, if we take this masterpiece that we're weaving and we flip it over, we then get a glimpse of the beauty on top, of the beauty of the woven blanket, the beauty of the garment that's being made, the beauty of the finely embroidered and cross-stitched pieces that is making a picture. an image. And some of them are very intricate. But it's not until we gain perspective that we can then see broader context. And that is what we're living in right now. This unique period of time that we're in, we've been hit with so much. We in this country are constantly bombarded with violent images and violent speech, frankly, from an administration that is actively gaslighting us, actively mentally manipulating us, and telling us that they're for family values, they love people, there's good people, etc. We're here for you, we're working for you, we're tax cutting for you, we're giving you money, we're making America great again. But when we pull back and we see the larger picture, the larger framework, we see the context, we literally have seen children being put in cages, pulled away from their families, parents who have lived here for decades, served our country even, are being deported to countries that they don't know, they've never lived in. We're seeing mass uprising of violence and criminalization on the regular, continually, and more acutely, of Black people, Indigenous people, and other people of color, simply because of who they are, simply because of the bag of skin that they inhabit. And the pandemic is the backdrop of all of this. And the pandemic globally has disrupted every single human being's life. Every single one of us. What we believed was comfortable and normal and we got used to has been upended. We are in this period where our puzzle pieces are being pulled apart and flipped from simply the cardboard side, flipped over so that we can see the picture. And this is where so many of us are at now. And this is why it can be so shocking and so acutely disturbing to you, because you're awakening. You're being shown the context now, where before you were only given content and you were simply told to just keep putting these pieces together. Trust us, believe us, keep putting these pieces together. And especially for those of us in the non-Black and white communities, we need to understand that our country, America, is not white history. Our country, America, is Native American history, is Black history, is our white ancestors came to this country and settled in this country and did the very atrocities and violations that they were leaving Europe, England, to get away from. They were enslaved in Europe and England, and they came to this country believing and wanting themselves to be free. But what did they do? Instead of looking at their context, they based everything on their content, and they began to perpetuate the pattern conditioning that they had just come from. Our location, many of you have had this experience. You've believed that if you simply change a job, or if you lose weight, or if we color our hair differently, or if we grow our hair, or we cut our hair, or we change our makeup, or we find a new spouse, we cheat on our spouse, we refuse to get married, We have children. We don't have children. We move to a different state. We believe that all of these things will bring us new life, will bring us new content. But we forget, we get tricked into forgetting and denying that we are the common denominator in all of that. And it isn't until we begin to examine our content in light of the greater context of our lives, our conditioning, our background, our family of origin, their stories, their pattern behaviors, themes, generational themes that have been handed down, where we grew up, how we grew up, who our friends were, what our life experiences were, how we were taught, the information we were taught and told, and what things actually mean. In the content of my life, I was taught that, yes, this event happened to you, and we took care of it. They went to the police. They did the right thing then. And he was in jail, I think, for a weekend. And I think maybe he had to go to a few classes, community service, and that was it. And this was back in the early 80s, when they really didn't do a hell of a lot. I then did not receive any counseling or therapy. I basically was told, we took care of it for you. What more do you want? It's done, it's over with. And so the messaging that I received, the content that I was given, was flat affect, meaning simply just ignore it away, put it off in a corner, put it in a box, just like this puzzle is in a box, take all those pieces, put it in a box, put it on a shelf, and forget about it. But here's the thing with that, folks. All of that content was still living inside of me, and it was unresolved, and it was disrupted. And disruption will always find a way out. And so it began. And I would have outbursts out of nowhere. Events, situations that felt familiar to me, but I didn't understand, would trigger massive breakdowns. I began to not care about school, and I was never someone that didn't care about school. I loved school because, again, it was all about gathering information for me. I was always searching for something. But I began to not care about school. My teachers noticed. I began to act out in ways that were not my normal, usual pattern. The disruption was rising. And when I had children, I found myself in relationships where I was neglected, where I was abandoned, where I was mentally and emotionally manipulated, where I was left on my own a lot and not cared for. My feelings didn't matter. So again, the running themes. I then eventually moved into other relationships where there was other abuse. I was cheated on repeatedly, and then gaslighted about it and told that I was crazy and it wasn't happening when I knew what was going on. So all of these messages kept coming to me because, again, when you're looking only at content and you're not looking at the larger context and seeing how the picture informs what's going on and how the pieces are working together and fitting or not fitting, then you're just going to run on autopilot, and you're going to run upon those behaviored, conditioned patterns and beliefs and thoughts that you have about yourself, that you have about other people, and that you have about the world around you. So in this framework and in this time period right now, what we're being faced with is this disruption of the pieces of the puzzle we've been given, the flipping over, showing us the pictures. And a lot of us as white individuals are finally learning and being faced with a lot of realities for the first time, some of us. Some of us have believed that because we have friends who are in these groups, Black, Indigenous, people of color, minorities, that makes us somehow better than the person next to us who has the Confederate flag and she is believing white supremacist beliefs, etc. Racism is not about the inherent hatred toward another because of their skin color. Racism is an entire institutionalized series of systems that work together. The larger context here are all of these systems that work together. They're gears that run a larger machine, a higher context, a higher perspective. And for those of us, the lens is being widened. It's no longer telephoto, it's no longer macro or micro, it's no longer focused in acutely on just us. We're seeing a wider lens and it's opening up and we're beginning to see the entire picture. And for a lot of us, it's very shocking. For many of us, it creates shame, it creates guilt, it creates anger, it creates sadness, it creates confusion. And for some of us, it's a threat. And certainly for those in positions of power who are sitting high up on those hills and they see the landscape and they're playing the game and they're moving the chess pieces along, it's a definite threat that we're waking up and we're seeing how the game is being played, how those puzzle pieces have been handed out to us, how it's all incomplete. In my undergrad studies, particularly in psychology, there were many classes that I had taken in my associates that I had to repeat: biology, some math, and cultural studies, anthropological stuff, sociological stuff that we had to take in order for us to be given the broader context. Because especially that focused degree is on understanding the content. But in order to understand the content, we have to understand the context. And when I was given that notice, context informs content, everything just magically clicked for me, and it was brilliant. Came from spirit. It didn't emanate from me, but it explains so much. And so understanding these other areas, understanding biology and biological processes informs our body responses when we are triggered, when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, when we're facing stress, when we're facing breakdown, etc. It's important for us to understand those landmark physiological processes to explain the behaviors, to explain the thinking and the thought patterns and the beliefs. We need to understand sociological, groupthink, cultural rules and mores and attributes so that we are then informed of larger contexts. And that's what we're going through right now. For many of you, it's like you're getting a college degree, but you didn't even know you were enrolled in school, and it's being funneled at you like a fire extinguisher on full force, on full blast. So for those of us that are willing to, that have stopped ourselves enough and said, hey, hold on a second. I recognize that my puzzle's incomplete. I recognize now there's no picture, there's no frame of reference for me. And the reference that I thought this was is no longer serving me, is no longer enough, is something that I recognize now has been a disruption and has been an illusion all along. For those of you in that space, I encourage you to continue that path and continue your own unlearning. And then in that unlearning, to begin to seek out broader context, seek out more of the history, seek to understand what these systems are and how they work, and why they're so targeted and detrimental toward Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The system is rigged, folks. And a lot of you are thinking the system is broken. The system is working as it's been designed to. We're just waking up to it. We're just finally, again, seeing a broader context. We're getting a broader glimpse. And some of us are at different points upon that hill and we're climbing. Some of us are at the top and they've been shouting down for decades. I think of Martin Luther King's Mountaintop speech. I was on a retreat and I received that speech as an exercise for me in speaking my truth and really connecting in with that. But the weight of that speech was so much more for me in that moment. And that speech really, I'd heard it before many times, but to speak it and to really read it and internalize that speech really helped me as well in my own spiritual journey. But that mountaintop speech, you know, there have been, and there are people up on that top of the mountain, they're shouting down. And for some of us, as we get closer, we can hear it. Some of them on the mountaintop have bullhorns. Some of their bullhorns have been taken away from them. Some of them on the mountaintop have been pushed off and their voices stopped. But we're always rising and others come to replace. So it becomes a situation where, are we going to continue to rise and elevate so that we can see broader context, so that we finally understand what the content is and why the content is behaving, acting, believing, thinking, expressing the way that it is in our own lives personally, and certainly in the lives of our neighbors, certainly in the lives of those in our communities, and the lives of the individuals across the globe. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here and for your willingness to understand. Your willingness to get that context informs content. Disrupt your puzzles. Flip them over. Take the pieces apart. Flip them over. See the imprint of the picture upon them and begin to put them together anew so that you can understand from a broader perspective, a wider view with a bigger lens. And that will inform you of what's going on in your own life, in your own heart, in your own thoughts, in your own beliefs. And then you can dismantle those, challenge them, and readjust and begin to heal what has been ingrained inside of you and what we've just blindly accepted. Maya Angelou said it best. We do better when we know better. And a friend of mine told me years ago, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. We don't know what we don't know until we know it. And this, for many of us, for many of you, is your period of knowing it. And so now the work begins. Now we can take apart those pieces of the puzzle that we were handed that are just simply the cardboard expression, and we can turn them over and begin to put them back together and see a larger, more beautiful picture come into view. I'm Raelin Saindon. This is Live Out Loud. Thank you for joining me. And I wanted to tell you about a book that I've collaborated on. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Self-Healing Techniques. And in it, I wrote a chapter 12 on body awareness. It's a very important book. It's got a ton of resources. 25 authors have come together and written about these amazing healing experiences and techniques that they use in their own businesses, in their own lives personally, and how they have been personally helped and have been able to serve others and help them in a larger context of healing. So if you're interested in that, you can find that book on my website, www.raelinsaindon, that's RAELINSAINDON.com. The Ultimate Guide to Self-Healing Techniques. You can buy a signed copy from me, $20, less than what you would find it on Amazon for, and I will personally send it to you. You can find it on my website, www.raelinsaindon.com, and take a peek around there too for my other services and other media that I have there. Lots of great resources there for you as well. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Live Out Loud. Stay tuned. There's going to be lots of amazing guests on here, more amazing topics. And my encouragement to you is to begin to take apart these pieces of your puzzle and put them back together with a richer, more vivid picture so that you can live out loud.